En primer lugar, quisiera enfatizar que estoy muy orgulloso de estar aquí para anunciar lo que el Estado de California hará para ayudar a los niños cruzando la frontera, quienes huyen de condiciones muy peligrosas, caminando miles de millas para escapar una vida de violencia y una vida de pobreza. No hay manera de solucionar esta situación fácilmente. Eso lo reconocemos y quisiera yo enfatizar y subrayar eso. Pero no podemos simplemente ignorar a estos niños inocentes. Ya hemos escuchado reportajes que varios niños que fueron deportados a Honduras han sido asesinados a corto plazo a su regreso a su país natal. Claramente los niños cruzando la frontera están huyendo en peligro, algo que es real y merecen la oportunidad para contar con sus historias. Y eso solo será posible con representación legal. Empleados, el equipo del Senado han ofrecido como abogados para representar a estos niños como voluntarios gratuitamente. Y esos empleados del Senado nos han inspirado para encaminar un proyecto de ley que ofrecerá representación legal a estos niños. Hoy nuestro Estado está poniendo el ejemplo al resto del país y quisiera de nuevo enfatizar y subrayar. Hoy nuestro Estado, el Estado dorado, la octava potencia mundial, el Estado de California, está poniendo el ejemplo al resto del país, dándolos a estos niños y familias una oportunidad justa para obtener alivio inmigratorio. La legislatura, el Senado y la Cámara Baja de la Asamblea y el gobernador Jerry Brown ha monitorizado esta situación desde su comienzo. El presidente de la bancada latina, el senador Ricardo Lara, y la senadora Norma Torres han sido líderes, igual como el presidente actual del Senado, Darrell Steinberg, han sido líderes en este esfuerzo. Y juntos visitamos al centro de detención en el puerto de Huanimi, en el condado de Ventura. Estamos hoy para compartir lo que pensamos que es una solución clave para ayudar a esta crisis humanitaria. Ahora me gustaría presentar a nuestro presidente actual del Senado, el senador Darrell Steinberg, para explicar lo que hará el plan de California.
Thank you very much, Senator de León. It's my honor to be here with my Senate colleagues, the next pro tem, the leaders of the Legislative Latino Caucus, to talk about these very important measures which we hope to pass in the last couple of weeks. Certainly, you know, the media and the legislature often focused on the last-minute things. And, you know, sometimes the last-minute things are not so great, and sometimes they're really compelling. This is an example of something that's really compelling, and that has arisen in the months since we began our legislative session. We all know about the plight of children traveling from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras who are taking a most perilous journey because of the conditions in their home countries, the fear for their safety because of gang activity, the lack of educational and economic opportunity in too many instances. And parents and children are making these unbelievably risky, difficult, and in many instances courageous decisions to try to lead a better life. And we have a law here in this state and in this country that says if a child can prove in the federal immigration court, before the federal immigration court, that it would be a danger for them to go back, they can get asylum and stay. Well, what we have uncovered over the last weeks in researching the obstacles for many of these children is that there is a major hole in state law. For a child to be able to make his or her case before the federal immigration courts, they must first gain what is called a predicate court order from a state court. From a state court where a judge finds that it would be dangerous for them to return to their home country. Too many state judges aren't aware of this requirement and are denying any form of preliminary state relief because they think this is just a federal immigration issue. As a result, when the kids get before the federal immigration court, the federal immigration court is saying, well, you don't have your state order. So we are clarifying, or seek to clarify in state law, that the state courts, whether it be a family court, a juvenile court, a probate court, must make that requisite finding, if appropriate, to say that a child's return to their home country would be a danger to themselves and their futures. Then these children will be much farther along in being able to make their case before the federal court. In addition, we seek to appropriate $3 million for nonprofit organizations throughout California to provide the legal preparation and legal representation for children who are going to have a much better chance if they have somebody beside them helping them. In conclusion, I could turn it over to Senator Lara. As many of you know, I had the opportunity to travel to Central America during the summer recess. And it was a very impactful journey for me because I saw firsthand the conditions in some of these countries. And I came away with the reinforced belief that there are really two answers here to this problem. Number one, we as a country, and whatever we can do as a state as well, need to do all we can to help these countries economically and to build up their education systems. Because kids leave because they want a better life. Maybe we can help them have a better life in their countries of origin. But for those kids who have traveled here, I've said it a number of times, I want to say it again, a kid is a kid is a kid. It doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter, their immigration status. We need to go out of our way to make sure that children are safe and give them every benefit of the doubt when it comes to their petition to stay here. And that's what this legislation we seek to pass in the last week and a half of this session will do. It's my pleasure now to turn it over to the chair of the Latino Legislative Caucus, Senator Ricardo Lara.
Thank you, Senator Steinberg. First, I'd like to thank Governor Brown for his courageous leadership in helping the Latino Caucus on this important issue. I also would like to thank Senator Steinberg, Speaker Atkins, for allowing us to really discuss this critical issue and this humanitarian crisis that we face in California. Again, let me be very clear. California, once again, shows tremendous leadership where the federal government continues to fail. And the proof is in the pudding, and today we celebrate a tremendous accomplishment where we're going to ensure that the children that reach the Mexican border in California have due process. The $3 million is going to help with these nonprofits to ensure that they can build a case for these children. We know that every fact and every percentage states that if a child has an attorney, the likelihood of them obtaining a stay is much greater. And so we know that the children are now going to have an opportunity to plead their case. We know in some instances where some of the children have been returned that they unfortunately have lost their lives already. And that breaks my heart because these are children, as Senator Steinberg said, children fleeing a crisis that for the most part we share in that responsibility as United States citizens. Every time somebody in this country buys or sells drugs, we're putting another child on La Bestia, or the train that leads them back or leads them up to the border. And we have to be very cognizant of that fact, that we also share in the responsibility of the crisis that people are living in Central America. And we have to do a much better job in coordinating with not only with the U.S., but with the Central American governments to ensure that we let them know that the type of criminals that we are releasing into their communities. There is no organization right now which is only continuing to exacerbate the problem that we're seeing in Central America. And like Senator Steinberg said, we have to view this as a humanitarian crisis. These are children who, for the most part, have lost their family and most importantly have lost hope. And there's nothing more sad to me than a child without any hope. And I'm glad that today we're able to give them that chance to be able to stay in the United States and be productive members of our society. I'd like to just say that for the Latino Caucus, this is the #1 priority. Again, I want to thank the governor for his tremendous courage and Senator Steinberg and Speaker Atkins. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to add that the world is watching. The world has been watching the U.S. They have been watching images of children sleeping on the floor with plastic blankets. The UN has come forward and said unacceptable. What California has done this week, it is a model for the entire U.S. And I hope that President Obama, and I hope that the U.S. House of Representatives is watching and can lead by the example that California has set forward. I am so proud today to be here with all of you, with my colleagues. I am so proud to call Governor Brown my governor. I am so proud to be a Californian, and I am proud to be an immigrant. So thank you, all of you, for what you have done to bring this issue forward. These children are not trying to sneak under or climb over a fence. These children are saying, after walking 1,200 miles, they are saying, I am here, help me, I want to live another day. So with that, thank you for your leadership to both of you, and thank you to the Senate and the Assembly for being the leaders that we have not seen either in Congress or coming out of the White House.
All right.
You happy to answer any questions?
What, if any, discussions took place with the courts, the judicial branch about the legislation? Have there been talks yet, or will those come?
Well, I know a number of our staffs have actually taken the training. Margie Estrada, who's right back here from my staff, has taken the training to qualify to represent children. And I think it was in the course of her training that we realized that this hole existed in the law. And of course, we'll confer with the judicial branch. We just want to make it clear that the state courts have an important role here. And if they don't exercise that role, then the children don't even have the opportunity to attain the relief that in many cases they deserve and need.
Now, would the bill change any presumptions, any standards of proof, or is it simply a matter of
It is, no, it is,
Would it be harder or easier to make the case for?
It should be easier because it really seeks to clarify in very firm and clear language the state court's responsibility. And I think judges, state judges, it may be a matter of just misunderstanding and the belief that, because generally immigration is a federal issue, but there's a state role here, a state court role, and it must be exercised if the children are going to get the help they need.
Present evidence that they would be.
No question, it's not a rubber stamp. The state court has to hear the case and understand and determine whether or not returning the child to his or her home country would represent a danger to that child.
Tim, I'd say is that this is a process issue, obviously legally, given the fact that many presiding judges over the jurisdiction in the judicial branch of government, 58 counties throughout California, many of these judges are unaware of this provision. Obviously, their knowledge, their legal acumen with regards to immigration law, obviously it's not their purview, as the pro tem just underscored, so it's limited to non-existence. This would change that. Obviously, we'll be engaging with the presiding judges of the respective courts throughout California. So this doesn't enhance, if you will, the weight of the case itself before a federal judge, but rather it just gives them opportunity to have the case heard before a judge, period. What the outcome is at the end of the day, what evidence they provide, what criteria is necessary that a federal judge will request is out of our hands at the end of the day. It's out of the Congress's hands, it's out of the White House's hands, it's out of our hands. We just want to make sure that these young children have an opportunity to have their case heard before a federal judge of the United States. And, it's pretty difficult to actually see when you have a 5-year-old child, and we've heard this on numerous occasions, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old child be escorted into a federal courthouse with no legal representation, and that in itself is a rubber stamp for the expedition of her or his deportation from the country, not knowing what awaits her in her country of origin, given the fact that Senator Ricardo Lara had just mentioned, there already have been reported a handful of deaths, of murders of several children who were deported very efficiently, but be mindful, to Honduras specifically upon their return. We don't know the circumstances specifically, but we have factually that they were killed. So again, we don't prejudice the case itself before a federal judge. We will allow the opportunity to have the case heard before a judge.
Do you know if this is a unique thing in California that the state court has to make this finding before the federal court does, or is that the case in all the states?
It's a case in all the states. The federal court will not entertain the case unless there's a state court order, so that would apply to other states as well. Whether or not they are having the same problem, as we know, and I think Senator Lara said this, and it's something we point to with great pride. California is addressing this crisis in a very different way than other states. And I think that's very clear. And it's something that that we're proud of, because we're not, it's not, you look at, we're putting forward a bill that, as Tim heard, is a technical change, a clarification. Nobody's interested in the kind of grandstanding that we see from leaders in other states here in ways that aren't helpful to kids.
And can we just say that also time is of the essence, given that unfortunately the president and leaders in Congress are trying to expedite laws to ensure that these children are deported quickly. So we know that unfortunately, this is a reality in Washington, D.C., but we need to ensure that the kids have their due process. And this is a way for us to ensure that it's at least it's being done and the process begins, so that we can try to detain what the federal government is trying to do, and is deport these kids. And we know that laws already exist to protect these children. It is unfortunate the federal government is trying to create exemptions just for brown children, just for children from Central America and Mexico. When, would this be the similar case if there would be children from Europe in the similar situation, or children from Canada? And so it's unfortunate that we find ourselves still, in this day and age, trying to combat discrimination of this sort at the federal level. And this is our response to the feds, that we're not going to sit here with idle hands. We're going to fight and ensure that these kids have their day in court.
So this be a catch-22, you think, because many families from Central America report being misled by coworkers telling them, hey, you send your kid out here into the United States, that the U.S. government will be receiving them with open arms. As we know, that's not the case. But in California, taking this position, will that not encourage more families to send more children and making that dangerous journey? As we all know, it's dangerous to get into the border of the United States.
Right, and we've all heard those rumors, and for-profit coyotes, for lack of a better word, are doing that. And there are efforts at the federal level to send the message to families, efforts in press releases, in TV commercials, in songs. There is a lot going on at the federal level, but we know that that isn't enough to address the issue of the children coming to the border and saying, here I am, help me.
Can I just add, I'm confident that this change in state law and this funding is not going to encourage people to come here who otherwise would not, right? These are desperate decisions. They're desperate decisions. And so the fact that we are trying to ensure that the kids who do come here have legal representation and have a transparent, relatively easy to understand process to try to make their case, that's not going to encourage more to come. They're coming.
Does it give credence, though, to what the coyotes have been saying all this time, although, erroneously saying, but now families down in Central America might say, well, now my son will have, or my daughter will have legal representation now.
Well, if that's the message put forward by coyotes, that's not our message. That's not our message. The message is for the kids who come here, who've made that journey, they ought to have a real chance to make their case.
One thing we've seen too is we've seen a dramatic drop, if you will, of the migration of young children coming up northwards to the Mexican border and eventually to the U.S., there's been an incredible drop. And that's because of the engagement of the State Department, along with the three, respective governments, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, working in collaboration and engagement. They have to continue that engagement, if you will, with the general population, why it's dangerous to send your child alone, upwards north, as Ricardo Lara just said, through the Bestia, which is the beast train, if you will, the infamous train, where a lot of rapes, a lot of robberies, a lot of sexual assaults of these young minors, of these young children, willing to risk everything to come north, fleeing this horrible violence. But we've actually seen a dramatic drop in the migration of these young children.
So Mexican children can also apply for legal assistance?
That is different. I'm not a legal expert on that, but my understanding with regards to the State Department, if you are Mexican or Canadian, yeah, they can. Yeah.
They're
They have a
unaccompanied.
different,
They can't
yeah.
apply for the SIJS action.
There's not going to be a restriction on the use, there's not going to be a restriction on the use of the $3 million that nonprofits are going to have. They can help unaccompanied Mexican children as well.
Senator Steinberg, what about the existing need in California for legal help? Last year, I think there was 50% or more of people walking to legal aid clinics, Californians, who couldn't be helped because there's not enough money. And these are California kids who are facing addiction, kids who are facing domestic violence. Is it fair to them to see $3 million go to citizens from other countries?
I think it's a very fair question, and my answer is we have to do a lot more for a lot more people. But I think whenever we get into dividing people, that someone's getting it and others are not, I just think that that's a mistake. The fact is that this is a current humanitarian crisis. And you're right, there are a lot of kids who've lived in this country all their lives who also have great needs. Let's not do nothing for nobody. Let's help the kids in this crisis, and let's do more for the kids who have lived here a long time.
The $3 million going to the nonprofits, can you see that changing as this progresses? Or is this strictly only for the kids that are here right now?
I don't, the money is for nonprofits to assist unaccompanied minors who come from Mexico, but predominantly Central America.
But it's, what I'm saying though, can that money change? Can the $3 million actually expand to be more later on as the year progresses and more
Well,
children?
that'll be, there's a week and a half left in the session, and it'll be up to the next leader and the team to assess the situation back in December and January, and see what the needs are.
It's our hope that we're not going to have to appropriate more dollars, meaning that number is going to, decrease quite dramatically, and it is what it is at that point.
We're going to do it as a budget trailer bill, and so that gives us the opportunity to have this take effect immediately. And it is a budget.
So 21 vote or?
21 vote.
There's also, yesterday, we passed a bipartisan resolution asking Congress to hold these governments, these Central American governments, accountable for addressing the root of the problem. So we are not simply addressing the issue at the courts or at the border. We're asking them to be proactive and look at the issue in its entirety. Like I said, these are children, these are not thugs, these are not drug dealers, these are kids. This is a humanitarian crisis. This is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. We're talking about children. And no child should have to stand in front of a judge and defend themselves. I
Without
couldn't
help.
do that. I couldn't do that without an attorney.
How many of these
Thank you. One more.
cases are estimated in California? How many children are here? How many cases will we heard?
Give me the latest number.
3,900.
What is it?
3,900 came from January 1st through July 1st.
Just for California.
3,900, right. So it's a large number, but we think we can help a lot of them. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.